Hey everybody, welcome back to the Pixelists Podcast, the podcast about all the nerdy things we love and enjoy. I'm your host, Will, and as you can see, I've got Jeremy here with me today because unfortunately Blake could not make it, but everyone's favorite fill-in host here, Jeremy, thank you for joining us. I do need to let everybody know that he did just have his wisdom teeth out, so he is going to be unable to converse, but he's here for moral support, and really that's all I needed. So Jeremy, thank you. The people thank you. You have both our hearts and minds. Anyway, y'all, as I'm sure most of you are familiar, when we have a Jeremy episode, things are a bit different. We will not be having our typical discussion portion on this episode of Critical Role. I will still do the in-depth recap for those of you out there that enjoy that. But other than that, that's going to be basically the full extent of this episode. And my apologies for that, but hopefully things will be back on course come next episode 73. Excuse me. Before I launch into the recap, though, a couple of quick announcements. Our Exandria Unlimited Calamity rewatch is upon us. That is happening this weekend for episode 1. That will be this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central Time. Now, for those of you in different parts of the country or different parts of the world, if you need help figuring out when that is, Critical Role normally airs at 9 p.m. Central Time. So wherever you are that Critical Role normally comes on for you, this will be an hour and a half earlier. It's going to be just episode 1. We're not like binging all 4 or anything. But this Sunday, 7:30 p.m., episode 1 of Calamity, with the idea being that we will watch, episode 2 the next week and so on and so forth. So would love to have you join us for that, whether it's your first time seeing Calamity, in which case we would love to have you join us for it because you need to see it, or it's your 12th time because it's just that good. And if that interests you, join our Discord. That is just a good place to be in general, but also a necessary place to be for this rewatch because that is where we'll be watching, that is where we'll be chatting, that is where everything will be happening. There will be a link down to that below. I feel like there's one other thing I needed to say about this, but it escapes me for now, so hopefully not. But yeah, Discord, boom, join, come say hello. Even if you're not interested in the Calamity rewatch, you should join the Discord. It's a good place to hang out, talk Critical Role, talk other nerdy stuff. Bada boom, bada bing. Other than that, the Worlds Beyond Number, The Wizard, the Witch, and the Wild One Arc 1 finale. We have not forgotten about it. We are both itching to talk about it. But as you can clearly see this way, schedules and stuff are a bit hectic right now. Clearly, I'm solo recording for this episode, but for Worlds Beyond Number Arc 1 finale, we did not want to have a solo record situation. Plus, we have time before the next episode comes out. So all this to say is that we didn't forget about it. That is still the next thing on our docket to record once things settle down for us. So that's coming for all of my Worlds Beyond Number fans out there. And again, I know I say this every time, but for you Critical Role folk out there that still have not checked Worlds Beyond Number out, you need to. It is so good. And like I said, the first arc of the show just finished, so it's kind of a great point to like jump in. You have a little bit of a backlog to binge and catch up on if you like it, and then we could all, full steam ahead together on arc 2 once that comes out. So highly recommend. Can't say that enough. Boom. And I feel like I had one other thing to say, but it escapes me for now, so I guess it hopefully wasn't too important. Yeah. So without further ado, let's jump into the recap. Now, for anyone that is on this recap video for the first time, I'm not always talking to a stuffed animal. I usually have a co-host, and we like to give an in-depth recap of the episode before jumping into our in-depth discussion and theory crafting portion on these episodes. For this week, there will be no discussion, clearly, because I'm talking to myself. But typically that's the case, just in case anyone new is finding us for the first time. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into this recap of let me pull up my notes here, episode 72 of Critical Role Campaign 3, Phantasmal Parlay. So, We pick up with the party arriving to the beach and basically still trying to hash out their exact plan. Chetney decides to whittle a copy of the compass just in case to have that as like a prop or a negotiating device. And as he does that, he then, takes a deeper look at the real one and notices that it doesn't have any markers or numbers on it and actually points in a singular, like unmoving direction. So this isn't a simple north, south, east, west compass. They then decide to whip out the portable hole and do some speaking with dead before they summon the pirates. So the plan here is Imogen is going to pretend to be Liliana to ask the questions. And they're going to actually cast this twice. So they're going to first do the underling, which was the druid, if you'll recall. And then they're going to speak with dead with Ratanish after that. So first up, the druid's 5 questions. They say, you failed your mission, or Imogen says, you failed your mission. Where is Odahanthal? And the response is, she remains at the key. How many have come over? I don't know, 100 or more. Did you ever speak to Ludinus? No. How much time until we strike? I don't know. What is the greatest threat to our organization? They've mentioned unity. Keep them scattered. So, after those 5 questions, they move on to Ratanish. She asks him, how do we communicate? The old-fashioned way. Tell me how we've protected our entrances to the key. We've manned them as requested, and Moonfolk have kept eyes as well. You were in charge of keeping the rebellion down, correct? Partially. Can you tell us about the entrances to the key? You have many tricks up your sleeve. The main pit entrance is easy. Otherwise, they were closed behind us as a precaution. And before this last question, there's been some deception checks and some insight checks here because, again, Imogen is pretending to be her mother. So on these deceptions and insights, Fern actually gets a whisper, and she reveals that Ratanish knows something is up. So for the final question, Imogen just rips his head from his corpse and asks, what happened to the wizard and the monk? And Ratanish says, probably dead. And then Imogen says, just like you. And basically they throw the corpses into the ocean at that point. But there is a bit of looting of the corpses. I think Fern takes a couple of Ratanish's teeth and nothing too important, but they did take what they wanted before they threw them into the ocean. So the party then prepares to summon the ghost ship, and they're going to try and parlay before combat if possible. So they make their preparations. Chetney places the compass in the water, and almost instantly, this massive ghost ship appears in the fog, and the temperature begins to drop, and mist is pouring off its deck as it's coming closer to the shore. And obviously it doesn't come ashore, but as it gets close, these figures start jumping off into the water and disappearing beneath the waves. Several figures do that, but then several figures remain on the ship as well. And then on the beach side where Bell's Hells is, these skeletons start coming up out of the water and, trouncing up the beach. And Chetney says, hey, and he's waving the fake compass in the air, call off the attacks and let's parlay. But Matt says, ghost pirates don't come to parlay. They've come for what is theirs. And so basically we just roll initiative. So combat starts, and as always, just going to try to hit highlights here to keep it brief. But people are taking out these skeletons. They're not too strong, but there is a lot of them. And when things start to get dicey is when the skeletons that they've killed just come back. They regenerate and start getting their health back and reanimating. So things start to get a little bit dicey. A couple highlights are there's some cool teleportation attacks going on with Ashton and their, temporal rage. Laudna amidst this combat is still attempting to parlay. She's yelling at the captain who is still on the ship, and she actually gets a nat 20 on her persuasion check. And because of that, the captain stops attacking, but he orders his men to continue attacking. He's like, okay, I'll parlay with you, but everything's still going to be going on while that happens. So Laudna starts trying to make her way to the ship, while Orym and Chetney are also making their way to the ship. Everyone else is just in combat during this chaos. Before Laudna makes her way to the ship, F.C.G does do another turn undead when like several of these skeletons are surrounding him, and it once again affects Laudna, causing her and all of the skeletons to turn and run away. But combat continues. F.C.G actually goes down a couple of times due to just these relentless attacks from the skeletons, but Fern is able to get him back up both times. Laudna does eventually make it to the captain, and they begin to have this parlay. She says, like, I'm like you, I'm cursed, kind of like a corpse. So let's work together. Let's end this. She fails the persuasion check in this moment, though. So the captain's like, well, you're going to have to do better than that. Like, what can you offer me in addition to my compass, which you have? So she ultimately offers up Chetney's possessed sword, Grastachar. And this next persuasion roll is better. So the pirate is like, you know what? Sure, you hand me over the compass and the sword, then we will in exchange give you passage. So reluctantly, Chet does hand over the sword to the captain, and that's where we go to break on the first half. So for the second half, Laudna fills in Bell's Hells, and combat has stopped. The captain has ordered everyone to stop. So Laudna's like, hey, I parlayed with this guy. We're all cool now, so like, come get on the ship. So the two parties introduce themselves. So we obviously have Captain Novos, but then we have First Mate Woders. I don't remember if I'm saying that right. Navigator Cirilla, and the rest of the crew: Jamal, Odo, Peters, Bruda, Vendalo, the Wits twins, Carmilla, Sanjay, and Kyle. The captain then says, all right, you gave me the sword, now give me the compass to complete the deal. And there's a bit of back and forth here where Laudna's like, I'll give you the compass after, you safely transport us. But the captain's like, nope, compass now. So they ultimately do give the compass now. And the captain says, find quarters wherever you can on the ship. This journey will take 3 days. So they set sail, and just, there's a few conversations that happen. Fern asks when Novos passed away. He says it was decades ago, but he's not really forthcoming with too much other information than that. He won't tell them what his compass points to, and they ask him, well, do you know what's going on in the real world, like with Brutus and Predathos, essentially, is what they're getting at. And he's unaware. He has little care for what's going on top of, being unaware in the first place. And they ask him, well, what would happen if your god, the god that reanimated you as these skeletons, what if he went away? And the captain's not too concerned about it. He's like, it's less about me worshiping that entity and more of I had to have an entity to come to in a dark moment. And so I chose the Strife Emperor, whose philosophy I agreed with. So the captain then kind of leaves to go talk to Grazi, actually, and I think go to his quarters. So the rest of the party has some downtime on the ship. F.C.G identifies some boots that the party's been hanging on to in the portable hull for a while, and they find out that they are boots of speed. And there's a long kind of discussion here about who these boots should go to, but ultimately Chetney gets them after trading Ashton his ring that Deanna gave him for them. So Ashton walks away with the ring, Chetney walks away with the boots of speed. Ashton has a small chat with Cirilla, the navigator, and it's actually a really good conversation. They talk about anger and the gods, and as the ship's navigator, Ashton asks her about the moon and Ruidus, and she reveals that, I haven't seen the moon for weeks, but I haven't told anybody. So it makes a lot of sense to her when Ashton kind of fills her in on what's going on. Bell's Hells then goes below deck and starts to mingle with the rest of the crew. They find out that they're from all over the world, but mostly Wildmount. And Sanjay is actually playing a violin, and Orym asks, do you take requests? Have you ever heard of Scanlan Shorthalt? And he says, of course, who hasn't? So Orym asks if he can play Beads of Love. And he says it might be hard on violin, but I'll try. So as they're all talking about different things, what do you do to pass the time? There's some card games being played. So Bell's Hells bring up Rollies, and the crew is, Rollies? What's that? They're very eager to learn how to play. So Imogen begins teaching them, and they quickly get like really into it. And so they just decide to play for secrets. That's what they're wagering. And Baruda actually loses, and so the first secret she reveals is that she was allergic to cats. Then Imogen loses, so she reveals that she's dating Laudna. So they keep playing, and like I said, the crew's getting really into it. And ultimately a tie happens, and so the whole crew is like, "What happens when there's a tie?" And I think F.C.G is like making up rules about like, oh, you have to, get somebody new to join. So they like drag in another member of the crew, and everyone's having a pretty good time. And that's where the episode ends. Episode again 73 of campaign 3, Phantasmal Parlay. So, well, I was about to launch into my normal spiel about check out the discussion, but again, we won't be having a discussion portion this week. So yeah, I guess just thanks for sticking around for the recap for those of you that did, and hopefully we are back to our normal scheduled programming come next episode. But as always, please let me know your thoughts in the episode, on the episode rather, in the comments. Because since we didn't get to have the normal discussion, I would love to discuss with you guys. So if there's anything like you really wanted to talk about this episode or explore or, whatever, let me know in the comments or in the Discord. And again, there will be a link down below to join that Calamity Rewatch this Sunday, 7:30 p.m. Central Time. Would love to have you there. Until next time, y'all.